January 28th, 1547. The air inside Whitehall is stale, thick with the musk of damp wool and festering flesh. Outside, winter scratches at the windows, a brittle wind dragging through the iron lattice like a blade over bone. But within the royal bedchamber, silence reigns. Not peace, not reverence, just silence. The kind that clings to the walls after something terrible has happened. He lies there, what remains of a king. Henry Tudor, defender of the faith, supreme, head of the church, a torso bloated beyond recognition, limbs blackened, ulcered, and motionless. His chest rises only in fits, a gurgling struggle between the body's refusal and the soul's escape. Around him, courtiers linger like ghosts, eyes darting, hands wrung. Not one kneels, not one weeps. They are not mourning. They are waiting, for certainty, for the whisper that the monster is truly gone. His crown, untouched, rests on a velvet cushion beside the bed, gold, heavy, unclaimed. The man who once wore it commanded thousands, severed kingdoms, and broke the spine of Christendom. But now he cannot even lift his own head. His breath rattles, his eyes no longer open. His bed is stained, and the room stinks of a decay none dare acknowledge. No priest dares enter, no son comes to say goodbye. The King of England is dying, but in truth he has been dying for years, and the silence has never been louder. Once he was beautiful. Golden curls, athletic grace, a face unmarred by time or guilt. Henry Tudor was England's glittering future, born not merely to rule but to dazzle, the second son who rose to the throne by fate's reshuffle. He was everything the kingdom prayed for after years of war: charm, strength, majesty. The people cheered him as if he were sent by God himself, the mirror of a divine ruler, until the mirror cracked. The first fracture was subtle, a distrust in his advisors, a flare of rage when challenged, the seed of suspicion when the truth bruised his pride. Slowly the mirror's glow dimmed. In its place, shadows multiplied behind his eyes, shadows of a boy who feared being forgotten, of a man terrified of weakness. He wore his youth like armor, but inside it the fever of absolutism brewed. The court flattered him, historians praised him, and ambassadors trembled in his presence. But within the gold-paneled halls, beneath the pageantry, he began to believe in his own myth, no longer king by birth, but by divine force, a god in human robes. This chapter was the calm before 1,000 storms. But even then, you could see the sky turning. Henry wasn't just building a throne, he was building a cage, and it was shaped in his own image. The beautiful prince would not age gracefully. He would rage against time, truth, and the God who had made him mortal, and the mirror would shatter. It began with a womb. Catherine of Aragon, devoted, regal, barren, of sons. She had given him a daughter, loyalty, decades of dignity, but Henry wanted a male heir. And more than that, he wanted Anne. Anne Boleyn, fire-tongued, sharp-eyed, untouchable. His obsession for her eclipsed law, church, even fear. When Rome denied him an annulment, Henry tore down the ancient order. The Pope, once the voice of God, became his enemy. Priests were silenced, monasteries burned, statues of saints were dragged from their niches and smashed on cold cathedral floors. England's soul was rearranged to fit the shape of a man's lust and pride. This was not reform. It was conquest. The act of supremacy crowned Henry not just king, but high priest. He became both Caesar and Christ, rewriting heaven with a quill and a seal. Dissent became treason. Silence became sin. Those who clung to the old faith disappeared into stone towers and never came back. Anne finally became queen. But the kingdom she stepped into was scorched, and the cost of Henry's divorce was not measured in rings or vows, but in blood and sacred ash. The bells that once called for prayer now tolled for executions. And beneath the ruined steeples, England's people learned what it meant to tremble beneath a king who no longer feared God. She was crowned not with grace, but with fire. Anne Boleyn entered the palace like a comet, dazzling, unyielding, unpredictable. She was no soft court flower. She bled ambition, and it stained everything she touched. Henry adored her for it, until he didn't. The child she bore was not a son, but a girl, Elizabeth, a disappointment swaddled in silk, and so the fire that lifted her now turned against her. Whispers became daggers. She was accused of adultery, incest, witchcraft, all false, all fatal. Her downfall was not a fall, it was a ceremony, a pageant of humiliation designed to cleanse Henry's own sins. In the Tower she waited, alone, stripped of title, allies, even dignity, and when the executioner's sword was shipped in from France, its blade polished like silver judgment, Anne knelt beneath the sky. They said she smiled before it fell, not from peace but from the cruel knowledge that she had built this throne with her body, and now it would consume her. Her blood soaked the scaffold. Henry feasted that night, and the child she left behind, the one he dismissed, would one day bury every trace of him beneath her own golden age. But for now, her name was erased. Only the silence remained. Power devoured him. As the years crawled forward, the prince once lean and swift grew monstrous, both in form and fury. His waistline ballooned, his legs ulcerated, his temper blistered like his skin. Every mirror was removed from his chambers, every whisper stilled. Food became his ritual. He ate not to live, but to dominate. He devoured meat like he devoured lives, ruthlessly and without remorse. The court, once vibrant, dulled into submission. No laughter echoed in the halls unless it was prompted. His gaze alone could summon fear. Men who dined with him did so in terror, knowing one misplaced word could summon the Tower's cold stones. He married Jane Seymour next, soft-spoken and pale. She gave him a son, Edward. She died 2 weeks later, her body bled dry. Her name, praised as a perfect queen, simply because she did not survive to disappoint him. Henry began to see the divine in his own appetite. He was the law, the church, the nation, the sword. His voice rewrote truth, his needs erased history, and his court fed the beast, each one praying not to be his next meal. But power, like meat, rots in excess, and now the tyrant feasted alone. He knelt in the July sun, clothed not in armor, but in conscience. Thomas More, once friend and counselor, had refused to worship Henry's new church. He would not swear, he would not lie, he would not bend truth to satisfy a crown. And so he was branded a traitor. At Tower Hill, the block waited. The crowd held its breath. He forgave the axeman. He smiled. His final words were simple. I die the king's good servant, but God's first. The blade fell. And something shifted in the air. This was not just a death. It was a curse laid upon Henry's soul. A good man slaughtered to preserve a lie. More's blood was not the first spilled for Henry's vanity, but it was the first that left a stain he could not wash away. The chapel windows glowed with summer light, but inside the palace, darkness had begun to root. More's ghost would not haunt Henry in screams, but in silence. In every quiet moment that followed, the king would hear the echo of what he'd killed. Conscience, Anne of Cleves, discarded, foreign face that displeased the king's eye. She was never touched, never loved, yet exiled with the grace of a corpse given a crown. Catherine Howard, young, radiant, reckless. She danced through the palace like spring, but was little more than a child flung into a lion's den. When her past lovers surfaced, Henry's vengeance was swift and ceremonial. She was dragged screaming to the Tower. They say she asked for the block the night before to practice laying her neck. On the morning of her death, she said she died a queen, but her voice shook. Catherine Parr, clever, cautious, survived. Not because she was beloved, but because she knew when to kneel and when to pray louder than the others. She outlived him, but not without bruises. Each woman was a page in Henry's private scripture of power. Their bodies, their wombs, their smiles, all temporary offerings, They were pawns in his sacred war against time, and each time he took a new wife, the hope of love returned like a sickness. But love cannot live in a cage built from blood and silence, and Henry had forgotten what it meant to be held without trembling. By his final decade, Henry stood atop a mountain of bones. His enemies were gone. So were his friends. Even his most loyal ministers had met executioners when their usefulness expired. He had crushed revolts, rewritten theology, buried wives, and burned saints. But he had also carved away every soul who once reminded him of mercy. The court became a theater of shadows. No one trusted anyone. Spies were everywhere. Informants whispered through keyholes. Every conversation was a risk, and the king, bloated, bitter, and half-mad, suspected treason in every glance. His only son, Edward, was frail, his daughters estranged. The dynasty he bled for was already crumbling before his eyes, and yet he clung to his throne as if it would carry him beyond death. Every command he gave in those final years was laced with paranoia. Every law, a stone in his own tomb. He did not govern, he guarded. He had not built an empire, he had built a prison, and crowned himself warden. In his final days, the body betrayed what the kingdom already knew. His leg was a chasm of rotting flesh. The stench preceded him. No cloth could contain the pus. His breath reeked of infection. He could not walk. He could barely speak. And yet the court addressed him as Majesty, as if illusion could preserve power a moment longer. Servants fainted at the scent. Physicians offered potions with trembling hands. No prayers eased the pain. No touch comforted him. He slept fitfully, nightmares leaking from cracked lips. The crown, heavy and unused, sat idle beside the bed, and still no one said the word. Death. The King of England was dying in fragments. First his body, then his memory, then the fear he had built. One by one, the symbols of power turned hollow. Rings slipped from fingers, documents unsigned, rooms left cold. And in the end, the most powerful man in Europe died not with a roar, but a wet gasp, alone, in his own palace. In his own filth, the divine right of kings could not close his wounds, nor silence the rats that had begun to gnaw beneath the floorboards. When the news finally broke, no weeping followed. The boy king, Edward VI, was crowned at age 9, too thin, too sickly, too pale. England was handed to a ghost with a fragile heart, groomed by vultures already circling. The Reformation continued, but not with conviction, with confusion, with fire, with blood. Henry's name became legend, but not. His tomb is vast, ornate, and empty of prayers. Visitors pass through it without pause, their footsteps echoing across the marble floor like a hollow crown dropped on stone. He had tried to become immortal by reshaping God, marriage, and monarchy. But his legacy is carved in shadow, half-remembered. Feared, regretted, the wives he buried outshone him in memory. The daughter he dismissed would eclipse him in glory. The boy he longed for would die before manhood, and the church he created would fracture again and again, until even his name became a question mark. In the end, Henry VIII was not England's savior. He was its wound. In trying to become a god, he ensured he would never be remembered as a man.